Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today we're going to make rose calendula oatmeal soap. And I want to apologize because I had meant for my very next soap recipe that I put out on video form to be the shave soap, the men's shave soap. I will get to that and eventually, so keep watching for that video to come out. I had just already planned on making this soap because I'm this week been busy putting a bunch of soap up to get my store stocked again because I've just been selling a lot lately. And so this is one of the ones I'm sold out of and I need to get it made. But I promise I will make that shave soap eventually. There is just some slight differences in the way I do that than the way I do my regular bar soaps for just bathing with. Now, before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about, I almost always stick to a basic coconut oil base. Sometimes I will add other fats to it, but typically I stick to coconut oil. Now, if you have very dry skin, you may want to consider adding some other fats like shea butter, almond oil, and different things like that. And I've done that before. Yet I have found that the coconut oil soaps hold up well, they wash well, and they don't dry my skin. In fact, I have very dry skin, and that's all I use to wash my face with is my own homemade coconut oil based soaps. And I know a lot of people said, and I've read it before, that oh, coconut oil only based soap is too drying. Well, I personally haven't found that at all. So it may be up to you. I mean, even with my very dry skin, I have not had any issues with that. So it may be dependent on other things that you add to your soaps, but I'm always adding herbs and essential oils. I don't add any extra things for color. Any of the color that goes into my soap is coming strictly from the herbs that I use in it. So anyway, let's go over a few other things that you need to have on hand. If this is the first soap making video you've ever watched, is you will need to have some soap molds on hand. You can get the big long rectangular soap molds. I have one of those. I use it occasionally if I'm just trying to use up like some lard. I still have a bucket of lard I'm trying to work through. I don't cook with lard. I tried to use it up for soap making when I'm making soap just for like making a laundry soap or whatever, then that's the soap I'm going to use. But I always tend to have enough little flakes of soap left over that for soap making that I don't need to make lard soap for just that. It's usually all the little flakes that break up. I prefer using these molds like this, but the loaf type mold, if you use that, and I will link to that below, that's really nice if you want to slice your soaps, but you have to make sure that after 24 hours you press the soap out and then cut it, and then you're going to let it cure for up to 30 days. With this, I just press it out, the soaps out the next day. I just like doing it this way. It's just my personal preference, and I don't have a soap cutter right now anyway. One of these days Mr. Rain has talked about making me one, but I just haven't needed it, so I haven't worried about it. So I have a couple of these I keep on hand. I may get another one, and then I have one specifically for making the circular soaps for a shave soap for putting in the bowl. And then I also like to use the candy molds for the excess soap I have to fill those. And these make nice little gifts. I can put several of them, wrap them up, and add them to gifts. And I have several different shaped molds. And then I like to sometimes throw some of these into orders that people get, especially if they're doing bigger orders, like the skirt orders and sweater orders and stuff like that. And, you know, I'll either put in a homemade hair tie to match, or I'll give them a little handful of soaps wrapped nicely and all that. So just some ideas there. But okay, so other things you need to have on hand. You need to have your lye. Now typically this isn't the lye I used. I thought I'd buy it. It's actually a good lye, but when I went to look for it again, it wasn't available anymore. So I actually bought the Red Crown lye. That's I think it's Red Crown, not Red Star, whatever. It's one of those two. I've used that one quite a bit in the past. It's a pretty good deal if you buy the 3-pack. I will link to that below. I also recommend keeping some vinegar, specifically in a spray bottle, on hand. This is this color because it's my own homemade vinegar. It's pretty much all I ever use is my own homemade vinegar for anything, whether it be cooking, cleaning, whatever. And then you're going to need water, and then whatever you're going to need your fat. I actually have my coconut oil right now melting on my wood stove, because if you're using a fat like shea butter, coconut oil, anything like that, you need to have it melted first. and then any other ingredients you're going to put in there. So what I'm going to be starting with, because I just make small amounts at a time instead of making the big batches like some people do, like making a 5-pound brick or a 2-pound brick. I just make 6 bars at a time. That's just the way I like to do it, because I'm always making different ones, and so I don't like to have too many at once. I know it doesn't make sense time-wise because the time put into it, but for me, I just like this. It's just easier for me to work with. So however much you want to do is up to you. But for my small amount, you can, if you're going to do the size loaf type thing that I'm going to put below, you'll simply double this recipe to do that. But for this one, it is 20 ounces of the oil. So that's going to be 2.5 cups. That's 20 ounces. So I'm using 20 ounces of coconut oil. Now, sometimes if I want to mix it up a little bit, I might cut that back by 1/4 of a cup and then put 1/4 of a cup of either almond oil or avocado oil or shea butter or something like that. One thing about shea butter, it's kind of best to add it in a little bit later after you hit trace, which I'll get to in a minute, because it does tend to cause the soap to set up a little bit more quickly when you're trying to work with it. So I like adding it from time to time, but typically I don't do that. I just stick with the coconut oil. So let's get these things measured out. Oh, a couple more things you need to have on hand is some gloves. I like to use these nitrile gloves, and then but good kitchen gloves if you can find some good ones that fit. I don't like using those for soap making because I can never find any that are small enough, and they're too bulky and it makes it hard for me to work with, so I do the nitrile. Long sleeves are important. You may want to use a mask. Sometimes I'll just do this. I'll get to that in a minute. And some goggles. I'll link to all this stuff below that I can. If you're, if you're just getting into soap making and you need that, including a scales. You're going to need some sort of scale because it's very important that you weigh out your ingredients and get them precise. So while I'm waiting for that fat to melt, let me bring you over here and I'll show you. I'll get everything else started. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure that you turn your scales on after you got whatever you're going to measure your water in. And what I need is 8.5 ounces of water. And I'm just using filtered rainwater like I do for pretty much everything. We collect and filter our own rainwater. And so I'm watching that scale. I want to get it right at 8.5. That's going to be 8.5 ounces. And if it goes a fraction over, it's not a big deal. Okay. So right there it says 8.54. That's actually going to be close enough on the water. It's just such a small difference. If you want to get more precise, you can go drop by drop to do that, but I don't bother. And then I'm going to pour that into my big batter bowl or my 8-cup measuring cup. And now I'm going to put on a different measuring cup here, and I'm going to press this button here to recalibrate it to this, because you got to make sure you do that. Now, before you handle your lye, it's a good idea to put on your glasses, your goggles, your safety goggles, and whatever gloves you've got. And yes, I reuse my gloves a lot, so that's why you'll see stuff on here. That's why I like the nitrile. You can reuse them again and again. And then it's also a good idea that I got my sleeves all rolled up and then realized, oops, I need them down right now. I don't usually worry about that much when I'm just pouring the dry lye, but still it's a good idea. You don't want to get it on your skin. But that's also why I have the vinegar ready, because the vinegar you can spray on there if you get any lye or any of the soap while you're mixing it onto your skin. Spray that on there. And that will neutralize the lye. It's just a quick way to deal with it. And yes, it will neutralize it, despite some arguments on that. So anyway, 3 ounces exactly of your dry lye. Sodium hydroxide. Okay, right there. So it's actually 3.03. Again, that's going to be close enough, especially if you add just a little extra in your oil, just a little bit extra. That will help make up the difference of the lye, because it's more important that you're a little heavy on the fat than you are on the lye, because if you're heavy on the lye, the soap can be too harsh, and that can be what burns your skin or causes issues. Okay, so my coconut oil is melted. I like to make sure it's melted before I do this step. And this is when you really want to be careful, because the fumes, once you add the lye to the water, and you need to make sure you add the lye to the water, not the water to the lye. Water has to be in place first, then add the lye to it. And I prefer to use a slotted spoon when I'm mixing this. So this is a good time to be putting a mask on your face. What I do is I just try to make sure I'm in a well-ventilated area, and then I keep my face turned away while this is doing it. You'll be able to see the gases coming up, because that's what gets toxic, and you'll know when you breathe it in, because it will make your lungs burn. So that should tell you right there it's not safe. So mixing that in, I just try to back way away, keep my face turned away, and try not to breathe that in. Sometimes I'll cover my face, but I really hate doing that, to be honest. So you want to keep stirring it until you know for sure it's not going to be sticking to the bottom. If you feel it start sticking to the bottom, then just really scrape it off there. And then I like to, look, it's about to the point where I don't have to worry about it sticking anymore. And then I'll let it sit for a little bit before I add the fat, just a few minutes really. I used to measure, take the temperature and get the temperature of each, the fat and the lye, about 125 degrees before I added them together. Now I just don't mess with that. If you want to be more precise, it is a good idea to do that. But as long as the fat is melted and the lye is not too hot, it's only going to get up to 150 degrees at the highest anyway, and it quickly cools. So it only is going to take a couple minutes, and that's why I don't bother messing up, dirtying up the candy thermometers. Okay, while I'm waiting, I can get my ingredients ready that I'm going to add in there. And so one of the things, I've got some oatmeal. I've got about a half cup here of oatmeal. And to this same bowl, I'm going to put approximately a quarter cup of my calendula flours in here. Give or take. Probably should have got a bigger bowl. And then that much again of the rose petals. It's better to have all this stuff ready to go than to open up your jars and add it later while you're in the middle of mixing it. So about that much again. I just go by sight. I'm not very particular about it. I just know about approximately a quarter to a third cup of my herbs is what of each of the herbs is what I add. Now I'm gonna get that coconut oil and I'm gonna pour it into the water lye mixture. And then I like to stir it as I'm pouring it in there. And a couple things I forgot to mention is making sure you have a rubber spatula. This is going to be handy in a few different areas here. Now this 4-cup measuring cup, since I really never need it for anything else but melting fat in for making soap. If I'm just using the coconut oil, I usually don't bother washing this out except for once in a while, because I'm just going to turn around and fill it up with more coconut oil to melt and make another batch. Okay, so I'm going to stir this. And then another thing I forgot to mention that you'll want to have on hand is a stick blender. Stick blenders are one of the best ways to do this in my personal opinion. I'll link to this stick blender below. I had another one when I first started making soap and when I first started making videos. And it was the same brand, but it wasn't made near as good. This one has got stainless steel upper as well as this part, where the other one was plastic up here. This does have some plastic, but and then just the way the button held, it just wasn't as, I didn't like it. This one I like a lot better. Okay, so again, making sure you got your protective eyewear on and your skin is all protected and you got that vinegar handy. Okay, now I'm going to start, you're just going to start blending it. You can see immediately it starts turning white. Then what you're going to do is you're going to keep blending it until it gets to trace. That means it thickens up, and then you'll be able to run your stick blender through there and see little lines forming behind it. Okay, now that my mixture is to a very light trace, that's when I usually like to add my herbs if I want to make sure they're really well blended. Especially since I am using calendula flowers. This is actually back before I started breaking up the calendula, so I have whole flowers dried in here. And what I find is I have to keep scraping them off of the blender. This is why I need this handy. And so I like to add these things now, especially when it's something like this. So you see that it tends, the flowers want to kind of get hung up in there. And so I like to scrape them off, and then I'll just keep doing that. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and add that essential oil. I'm just using the rose essential oil. This is the Rose Absolute. I'm going to put 1 capful in there. 1 whole capful. That'll make a nice strong scent. Throw these little extra doodads in there. Make sure as you're doing this that you take your fingers off that button so you don't accidentally press it and get it blending while you're doing this. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see the thickness of this. It's not super thick. Some people might like to have theirs thicker. One thing I've noticed is that since I started using unrefined coconut oil, it does take longer for it to thicken up. Before I was using refined coconut oil, but I found I can get the unrefined for the best price at Costco. And so that's what I use now. But you can see it's getting pretty thick. And this is the consistency right here. I like it when I go to pour it in the molds. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take that off of there and scrape as much of this stuff off into the bowl. And one thing I forgot to say is that the length of time you blend is going to be anywhere from a couple of minutes to maybe 5 or 6 minutes. It's not a super long time, but it's going to also depend, again, on the fats that you're using and how long it actually takes. Okay, so I just like to start by pouring it right into the molds. I'll get them, yeah, it's a nice thickness right there. I'll get it mostly filled up, each one. And then, of course, if you're just using one big mold, just pour it all right in there. And that is going to be the easier way as far as pouring goes. And then in my small ones, I usually fill up 3 or 4 of these little small guys here. And I try to do that before it sets up too much because of all the funny shapes. If you've got those kind of molds that have funny shapes at the bottom, I say funny shapes, but you know what I mean. They got, you know, weird kind of shapes like these roses right here do, then you'll want to pour it while it's into those, while it's still very liquidy, very, you know, thin, not getting too thick, because you're going to end up with air bubbles on the bottom, and that can mess up the shape. When you go to press it out there, you're not going to have that same nice shape because the air bubbles will mess that up. Okay, and then I just like to do this. You can use a chopstick or something and run it around in there, and that's just going to help work out any air bubbles that are in the soap, especially down at the bottom, because when you press it out, that's going to show. Okay, set that aside. And then as it begins to thicken and set up, I'll start adding more soap into the mixture. It's not soap yet. Add the mixture on top of there and just keep piling it up there, because these are supposed to be 4-ounce bars, but I try to make sure, especially with all the other stuff I'm adding in there, that I'm giving my customer as much in each bar of soap as I can and making them as equal as I can. I want to make sure they're getting their money's worth. That's really important to me. But, you know, whether you're making your soaps to sell or you're making them for your own personal use and for gifts, I mean, soap makes such a wonderful gift. I mean, you get a lot of people that like to buy homemade soaps because people are all learning. They're getting tired of what's available to them in the store, and they're going to trust that a person that they know grows their own herbs and whatever. But so a lot of people are buying soaps, but man, what great gifts these are. I love being able to give the gift of soap because everybody uses soap. And when it's something that you've made yourself, it's handcrafted with your own little personal touches to it, it just is so much better. And on top of that, it's consumable, which means when they use up the soap, you can give them more another time. It's not just another gift that's going to sit and go unused. It's going to, well, hopefully they're going to use it. All right, so I'm just getting the last little bit. I went ahead and filled another one of the rosettes here, and because I remember these molds are smaller than some of the other ones I use, so I could make more of those. Some of them I only make 3 or 4, but this one I made 6 of the smaller ones because I ended up with quite a bit here. So you see how I'm doing this, I'm just piling it on. And like I said, if you're just using one big mold, or you're using a shaped mold where the bottom of it is shaped, then you may just want this flat. Since this soap is just a standard bar, then I do all my shaping on the top. And you can, if you're doing it this way, you can just do that however you want. So a couple ways you can do this once you got it in there is you can take a chopstick and add some little swirls, little lines to it like that. It's still a little bit soft for this, so it's not really holding or showing. I don't do that very often. I usually just take my rubber spatula and just try to push as much of the soap up onto the bar as I can, so I don't have too much coming out the edges, because those are just going to get in the way and get broken off anyway. And then after I get it all pushed up there, then I'll do maybe little peaks like this, or I'll make it, you know, do something like this so it's more like a frosted cake. So whatever you want to do, and the more you let it set up a little bit before you do this, the more what you do here is going to show. I usually, especially with this particular coconut oil, because it just takes longer than the refined, I don't usually wait. I just kind of let it do its own little thing there, and then there it is. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of waiting until tomorrow to show you the finished product, well, it won't be finished tomorrow, but it will be finished enough that I can press it out of the molds. Then I'm just going to go ahead and put some pictures right here of how the soap should look by the next day. It should be solid enough 24 hours later for it to be able to be pressed out of the molds. And then you're going to lay it out on some kind of board or whatever you have, or a cooling rack of some kind, anywhere where it can get the most amount of air as possible, so that it can cure for about 30 days. I always recommend a full month, 30 days. So today that I'm making this is, I think it's May 16th, or May 17th, and so what I'm going to do on June 17th, which is probably closer to the time that you're actually seeing this video, that is when I'm going to wrap them and then list them up on my store. Then they're ready to use, they're ready to sell. But again, make sure whether you're doing it in a loaf or you're doing it like this, you want to press the soap out of the molds the next day, 24 hours later. So, and also if you're doing it in the loaf, then you're wanting bars, that's when you need to slice it, because if you let it sit too long, it's going to be too hard to slice. 24 hours later is when it's ready to actually, it's solidified just enough but still soft enough that it can actually be sliced into bars, whatever size that you want them to be. And then another thing that I don't always think to say in my soap making videos is that take your equipment. So what I do is I put it all in that batter bowl, just like this, with hot water and dish soap, and then let it soak in that, because you got to realize what's in there isn't soap yet. It's a lot of fat. And you want to be careful that this doesn't all get poured down your sink like that. You want very hot water and then the soap, so that's going to get that off. And don't let this cool. Clean it off, let it soak for a bit, and then clean it off right away, so that you're getting all that fat and stuff off of there. If you gotta have it go down your sink, have it go down there with copious amounts of hot water and soap, so it doesn't clog up your pipes. Okay, it seems like I feel like I'm leaving something out, but the main thing I want to cover is, if you're new to soap making, just practice being safe with your lye. If you get a little bit on you, you'll know it, it'll burn, but you can take care of it right away. I get little pieces of lye that somehow escape and get onto me somehow, and I just spray a little vinegar, I rinse it off, I'm totally fine. I've never had any serious burns. It's not anything to be afraid of, really. You do want to practice caution, just like you do when you're learning how to pressure can or anything else. It just takes time and practice, and making sure you're practicing all the safety measures, you know, wearing your your protective eyewear especially, and then, you know, long sleeves are important, you know, and gloves. These are all very important things. And then I do recommend a face mask. And I've done that with the cloth, or, you know, done this, and I go back and forth. I really don't like things covering my face where I can't breathe, so I just find it easier to make sure I'm in a well-ventilated area, and I keep my face turned away while the lye and the water are mixing. But once the gases, that only takes a few minutes, and then that's done. Then it's just being concerned not getting this stuff actually on your skin. And in this form, if you get it on your skin, it's not going to burn right away. You might not even notice it, but you want to make sure that you wash your hands really good, or wash your skin, whatever part it gets on, really good. And, you know, don't forget to try to spray some vinegar on there too, because that will neutralize. Remember, vinegar is an acid, lye is a base. They're very opposite of each other. So together, the two neutralize each other. So that's why vinegar works. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're interested in more soap making videos, again, I'll have another one coming on the shave soap, and I have several more videos. One is just the very first soap video I put out was just plain old herbs. I didn't add any essential oil or anything, but I have others on peppermint soap. I have some using bentonite clay, some using colloidal silver. So I'll go ahead and link to the whole playlist on soap making right here so you can check it out. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.